Welcome back to the Real Estate Reserve Podcast. I'm Jason Balen from Hard Money Bankers, co-host Ian Horowitz from Equity Warehouse. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to another great episode with real guests doing real estate investing deals. Definitely looking forward to our guest that we're going to introduce in a second. Ian, I think I already know what the title of this episode is going to be because, you know, I looked at Dave's one-pager and it was really clean. It's I help real estate investors raise private capital. Who doesn't want to hear about that topic? That is a hot topic. So definitely looking forward to what kind of good nuggets we can get out of Dave here in a second.
Yeah, I'm excited about this topic because it's really what makes both of our businesses run on the back end, right? There's the forward-facing part of finding deals, lead generation, but there's also the back end where you need to put the money into the deal, and you don't always have it. And sometimes you want to get your friends and family to co-invest or co-lend with you. So I'm excited to talk about this. But before we do that, guys, just a little reminder, if you get any value out of this show, please share it. We don't care about the likes or subscribes. It does nothing for us other than boost our ego. But the best compliment we can give our guests is sharing that show and putting their information out there to the interwebs. So enough about us. I was going to complain about the snow that we got yesterday, but our guest is coming all the way in from British Columbia, Canada. So I will not complain about snow. And let's bring in Dave Dubeau. What's up, brother? How you doing?
Ian, Jason, great to be here. An honor to be on your show. Ian, great to see you again, man. I had you as a guest on my show last year, so awesome.
Yeah, man, excited to have you come in here and talk about this topic. And I think we just jump right into it, and people will get your background and your story by talking about it. But you know, we have this podcast, and Jason and I use accredibility for our businesses. I use it to raise capital and brokers when we're buying deals. That's the reason I have a podcast. Jason has it as credibility for his borrower clients that are borrowing hard money from hard money bankers. What's your belief behind podcasts, and how can people utilize it as a tool in the real estate business?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. So I've been running my podcast, Property Profits Real Estate Podcast, since 2018, which is quite a long time in podcast years. And like most people, initially, I started off trying to interview the big gurus, the big names in real estate, you know, trying to build up an audience. Hopefully some of those people in the audience would realize I was kind of a smart guy and reach out and want to do business with me. And that was very, very hit and miss. And I was doing the normal weekly type show, an hour long and all that kind of stuff. And that was annoying as hell because there's just no stability to it. Now, it's great for credibility building. It's great for kind of, you know, introductions and that kind of stuff, but it wasn't consistently leading to business. So about 3 years ago now, I came across this idea of, instead of trying to attract my ideal avatar as the audience, why don't I just skip to the front of the pack and start interviewing the guys and gals I'd like to do business with, give them a feature on my podcast, give them a platform, make them look good, forget about, you know, trying to make it all about me and all this kind of stuff. So I switched that mentality, went from doing like a weekly show to doing a daily show. So interviewing people multiple times a week. And that really worked very, very well for me. So then about a year ago, I decided, hey, this could be something that could be very, very valuable for capital raisers, because up until then, I've been working with mom and pop real estate investors, helping them get started with raising capital. I thought, you know what, a podcast would be awesome for syndicators, fund managers, you know, multifamily investors, development investors, people that are doing big deals, needing to connect with high income, high net worth type people. Why don't we create a podcast for them, attract their ideal avatar as their guests and as their audience, and just skip to the front of the line? So that's what we've been doing, and it's working really, really well. So this is a good way, you know, my spiel is, this is a great way to meet 20 accredited investors every month using a podcast.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting that you said, you know, cutting to the front of the line or getting ahead by using this platform to go out and speak. You know, I probably get caught up more in the background stories of people, and you know, I like hearing the businesses from 0 to 100. Like those are the stories I like hearing. Just knowing what podcasts I listen to. how do people make that content fun, or like how do they like? I guess my question is like, you know, if I hear you correctly, you're suggesting that people interview people that they want to do business with. So if I want to do business with firemen who are financially successful that want to invest in real estate, like how are you getting people to even get on the show? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Ian. So you and Jason and I, we're all in the podcast world. This is like old hat. We're doing this every day. It's no big deal, right? However, most people have never ever been invited to be a guest on a podcast. So it's an honor. It's a big deal for them. I'll give you an example. We're working with a client, Matt, and we found him a fund manager of $1 billion fund. So we reached out to this gentleman on Matt's behalf. We invited him to be on Matt's podcast. He'd never been invited to be on a podcast before. So it was like, he was nervous, all this kind of stuff. He jumped on the show with Matt. Matt made him feel at ease. And then there's a method to the madness with the interview. So typically what we're talking about is personal, professional, and financial success. What does that mean to the guest, right? So we start off, hey, Mr. Guest, what does your business look like? What are your big wins? What are your big successes? What are your tip for success? Then we merge into how do you combine personal and professional success? What does that look like for you? How do you balance things out? And then we transition into financial success very, very softly. And it's all about, hey, Mr. Smith, sounds like things are going really, really well with your business. A lot of people in your position, they're working hard now. They're making really good money. But moving ahead, they might want to take it a little bit easier and create some of that infamous passive income. What are your thoughts about that? What do you think about that? So just get them opening up, talking a little bit about that. And then the magic is, you guys, actually, once the podcast interview ends, you're still on the Zoom call with the person. And it's like, hey, Mr. Smith, sounds like things are going great with your business. You're talking a little bit about, you're dabbling in stocks and bonds and crypto, or whatever they talked about, right? How do you feel about the kind of returns that you're getting with that? How do you feel about the stability and in the security of that investment? Is that something you're 100% happy with? Or is maybe there a little room for improvement? I don't care who you interview. There's always going to be room for improvement, right? So then you transition. Well, you know what, Mr. Smith, we're working with some other successful business owners like yourself in alternative investments with real estate. We're helping to get them really good, solid, steady Eddie double-digit returns on their money, and at the same time, save them a ton on their taxes. Is that something you might be interested in taking a look at? Boom. Book them into a follow-up discovery call, plug them into your follow-up system, drip, 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 all that kind of good stuff. So the idea is that you do this in volume, not doing this once a week. You're getting in with 4, 5, 6 of these interviews every single week, batching them up into 1 or 2 chunks during the week. So ding, 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 and then getting them booked into follow-up discovery calls. Does that make sense, you guys?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think that makes a lot of sense and probably resonated with people. Ian, I don't think I told you this, but I had an idea to do something similar to this that, just like any one of my ideas, it's a big idea. And then I bring it back down to reality. It's like, shit, that's way too much work. I'm not doing this. But one of the mastermind groups that I hosted recently, I was like, I don't know where it came from, but I'm like, I should literally once a day interview every single real estate investor, every single real estate agent, every single mortgage broker in our local market, one a day.
Yeah.
15-minute conversation, the same thing, for the pure thing of like building better relationships with that person to try to get them to refer me business. And then I was like, that's way too much work. I'm not gonna do that. But that's different. I also wasn't like a direct need. Like, I think, Ian, this resonates with you well because you have whatever, let's say you have 2 big projects that are coming up and you need to raise a few $1 million per project. It's very, very easy to equate, say, hey, listen, I'm just going to spend 30 minutes a day on interviewing these folks. And, you're spending less time on that than probably going on 1 lunch meeting a week with an investor that who knows what they're doing. So it makes a lot of sense. Is this something that, a version of this that you kind of did when you were raising some capital for some of the projects that you were involved in the past?
Myself? Yeah. No, I wasn't that smart back then. No, I did the traditional way of raising capital. So connecting with my sphere of influence. Plus, I wasn't doing syndications at that time, you guys. I was doing more joint venture type deals for smaller projects. So that worked really well for that. So yeah, That's my
Yeah.
backstory when it comes to raising capital.
Yeah,
First.
I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think that, like, just like anything else is, hey, like Ian, if you had those 5 people that were already booked for you, you would do it. You know, you
Well,
might not want to go. You don't.
we just
may
talked
not,
about this the other
Go
day
ahead.
with one of the guests. You're like, hey, you should send up a follow-up email for what that guest wants to do based on his business model. He's probably a pretty good fit for you. So I did that exact thing. I said, a few weeks later, I said, hey man, just wanted to follow up. I noticed your podcast was getting edited by our VAs. It reminded me to reach out to you. Here's a video of a deal that we just completed. If that's something you're interested, let me know. Responds to me, hey man, I'm traveling for the next 30 days, but when I get back, I do, and he's local to me. He's like, I want to sit down and grab a coffee and a lunch. And I have no clue where it's going to go, but you are expanding on your network. And honestly, like, let's talk about scheduling in general. And I don't know your opinion, but like, we're booked out. Like, I was just looking today, I was talking to our buddy, John Farling, who hosts a podcast. He's like, I can't get guests. I was like, dude, I have my assistant. I get VAs, or you could use a booking service. I'm not sure if you do booking service, but I'm booked out, and it's not that hard. And we have a set dedicated time, and we're booked out all the way to June. And I'm like, what's so hard about it? Like, how far in advance are you booking guests? I mean, if you're doing someone every day, I'm sure you got.
So what we do is a little bit different, you guys. So your show is a little bit longer and more complex than what we do. So myself personally, I do my interviews on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. I've got time blocks in there. So basically from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m., those 2 days are my interview days. And then I've got interviews booked in 45-minute blocks back to back to back to back. Ding, ding, ding. We do the same thing for our clients, but typically they're running their businesses. They're looking for deals. They're analyzing deals. They're raising capital. They've got family. So they typically, they're looking for about 5 of these interviews a week. So we do 2 days for a couple of hours each day where they got the times blocked out, where they're doing 2 or 3 of these interviews in a day, twice a week. Does that make sense? So it's batched. It's not once a week. You just kind of fall out of the flow. I find it if you're doing it that way. Because again, our goal is to have them create a daily show Monday through Friday for these guys. So they're doing 5 or 6 episodes a week. Does that make sense? It's more of a volume type thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all learned a long time ago that, like, as soon as you're in the habit of doing something, it makes sense to just continue to do it over and over and over instead of trying to just spend a little bit of time every day to do it. That's annoying for a lot of people to do. So that makes sense. Generally speaking, so this podcast is the platform, obviously, to bring investors in. Makes a lot of sense. And like you said, you have they have follow-up calls afterwards to try to get them involved. It's not just that magical where, hey, cool,
no, that ain't gonna happen.
For 15 minutes, here's $200,000 for your next deal. Like, what are some, like, top mistakes that you see real estate investors make when trying to raise capital from investors?
Going too hard too fast, right? It's just like you said, Jason, that's perfect, right? You're not going to go from a half-hour interview with somebody to them cutting you a check for $100,000 in one fell swoop, right? That's illogical. But that interview creates rapport, just like you guys, right? You know that you meet somebody, you interview them, you're putting them up, you're making them look good, feel good, sound good. They feel good about you and the show. And then afterwards, you're getting them into a follow-up discovery call. So in the discovery call, I think the big mistake people make is they turn it into a full-out close them right now sales pitch, right? Which is a big mistake. That's too far, too fast. I recommend instead that it be kind of like an educational type thing where you're showing them how your deals work, big, broad strokes, right? Just seeing if there's curiosity, if there's interest in there, and then plugging them into your follow-up system. So when you do have deals, they're getting first look at it. They're getting first dibs at it. Like you guys are talking about, Ian, I think you're talking about trying to get together with the guy, have a coffee meeting, meet him face-to-face, get that relationship going. This is just a massive shortcut to making that happen, right? To kind of jump to the front of the line with that know, like, and trust factor. You get to know them and like each other on the podcast, then you work on the trust. That takes a little bit more time.
Yeah, I mean, I think too many folks, and Ian can attest to this, and I can attest to this, when I started raising capital, about 19 years ago when we started our company, was, if you need money today, you better have you're not
well
raising
before you're
capital.
thirsty, right?
You're
Somebody
not
wrote a
raising
book about
capital
that.
today for a deal that's closing tomorrow. Like, or when I say tomorrow, like literally tomorrow. Like, you need to have that. Most real estate investors, they're good at finding deals, or they think like, hey, I just got to keep finding deals. Like, you got to keep raising capital at the same time. Because what ends up happening is you got too many deals, you don't have enough capital, and like that's an uncomfortable position to be in. I like this approach because it's a kind of an easy, habitual way that, hey, once a week I'm spending time just podcasting with new prospects, and I don't have a new deal right now. But even if you did have a new deal right now, chances are they might not want to be involved in this deal. They might not be the right prospect for you, and for another month, 2 months, 3 months down the road. And we've seen that same thing. And too many real estate investors, they wait till it's last minute and they're struggling. And what happens when a capital investor sees that you're struggling to raise capital? Number one, they're going to get nervous and they might not be invest with you because they're desperate. Or if they're sharky, they're going to be like, yeah, maybe give me this return instead, or give me a little bit more equity, or give me this or that, because they know they got you. So
I agree, man. I don't know who came up with that term. Just find a good deal and the money will find you. I'd like to find that guy and smack him upside the head, because that's the worst advice ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, can I share with you guys a very interesting trick we just came up with very, very recently that's working well with some of our syndicator clients that are doing these podcasts?
Sure, let's hear it.
Yeah. So, most capital raisers, syndicators, they got some experience. They got a track record. They've worked with investors in the past. They've got past and current investors. So what we're encouraging our clients to do is, before we even launch their podcast, go out and interview 5, 7, 10, 12 of your existing or past investors first, right? Interview those guys and gals, give them the spotlight, make them look good, make them feel good. And then here's the trick. After the interview, you can accomplish a lot. So you're still on the Zoom call with the person, and then you have ahead of time pulled up the data on the kind of returns they got on the deals with you. Just quickly review that with them. And then you press record again. You ask them some open-ended questions, and you can get some amazing video testimonials from your past and your existing investors that way. Second thing you do, great time to get warm introductions and referrals, right? Third thing you can do, this is a great opportunity to get reinvestments. We just had a client the other day interview one of his existing investors, and without even asking her, she invested another 50 grand with him just from that reconnection, getting reconnected with him. So that's what we're doing with our new clients these days, get them to interview 7, 10, 12 of their past investors. It gets them some good warm practice runs at bat with much less pressure. It gets a bunch of content so we can launch their show with 10 episodes already in the hopper. And you guys know most podcasts don't make it past episode 7. So hats off to you guys being several hundred episodes in. And then you can get those video testimonials, referrals, and reinvestment opportunities all from that. So that's a quick shortcut to get in the podcast.
Yeah, it's definitely a massive credibility piece. And again, that's why we do it, because I can't necessarily quantify how many front doors I've gotten to be like, oh, I watched your podcast, I want to invest with you. I'm sure it's happened, but I get a lot more of, I met the person, they go and research you. And just like you said, you have several hundred episodes and they're like, oh, this guy's real, right? Yeah. And that furthers the conversation, and they can get to know you and feel you and understand your personality. And I kind of want to flip the question here a little bit, because obviously, like, you have your own podcast, there's authority there. What about going on other people's podcasts? Like, what do you think has more authority per se? Like, if you had to pick one, would you host your own podcast, or would you just try to be a guest on everybody's podcast? Which has more like impact, you think?
Well, the way we do it, hosting your own podcast. Because again, the goal of being on somebody else's podcast usually is to create that authority, kind of get the word out, and ideally connect with a bunch of their audience and try and get them to connect with you, whatever that looks like, and for whatever reason. But if you're doing the podcast like I'm suggesting, you skip to the front of the line. You start interviewing the people that you want to do business with, and you get that conversation going directly. And the growth of your audience is a nice byproduct, but it's not even the primary focus of your podcast. The primary focus is to interview the guys that you want to do business with.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess either way, you still need some sort of funnel on the back end, and where to push people. What do you I don't think people think much past, well, I'm just getting out there and I'm talking about it, and then you only get 5 views. But I think you need to realize if you get 5 views or 5 million views, you're only worried about the 5 people or people that actually care about what you're doing.
Yeah.
Where do you suggest people to like push traffic to? Like, I guess, do you guys work on that? Like, I've had ebooks, we've all had books, we've had all like goofy stuff to give away. How important is that to tie it back to the podcast to capture people's leads? Like, can you quantify how much you see people in increasing traffic?
Again, Ian, we don't even worry about traffic. That's a secondary byproduct. Don't really give a crap. It's really all about interviewing the people that you want to do business with, right?
Yep.
Now, the other trick that we do is on the podcast, instead of trying to push the audience to book a call or get my ebook or whatever that is, what we want to do is push the audience to book in to be a guest on the podcast, right? So that's the goal there. So it becomes a self-perpetuating type thing. They fill out an application. You can check them out, make sure they kind of qualify for what you're looking for. If they don't, you don't have to do the interview. You can politely decline them, but it's a great way for doing lead generation that way. So yeah, right now, I'm not even worried about the audience growth. It grows naturally, because the other trick we do, you guys, is our production team creates a bunch of assets for the guests. So we will create reels, we will create social media posts, we'll create all the stuff they can use to leverage their appearance on the show, share it with their network, share it with their friends and family, strut their stuff a little bit, and grow the audience organically that way.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I get it.
Yeah, I think
it's a little bit different than, and you might think we've had past in our mind what most people think about it, but I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it's a real fast approach to having real conversations with real accredited investors. Within the next few weeks, next few months, and build relationships and see where it goes from there. And
well, and it's so Jason. So imagine this: if you're doing 20 of these interviews a month, and even if you take off a couple of months for vacations and Christmas and Thanksgiving, all that kind of stuff, that's still like 200 connections in a year. Now, you can't, like, if you do a reasonably decent job of follow-up, it's impossible not to raise capital from 200 accredited investors that you've interviewed on your podcast.
And another thing that I was added benefit, I don't know if this is an added benefit or not, but like I talked to a lot of lenders that are trying to raise capital, trying to raise additional capital in that space, not syndications, but lenders that are trying to raise capital for to expand their lending businesses and just do marketing in general. And a lot of them, like, they don't want to jump on camera. They don't want to do content stuff. I'm like, hey, listen, like, all of us, we all have just been on camera for a long period of time, and like we can all say
we are a hell of a lot better looking than most people. I got to say that.
Like we all suck at it. It's just we just have done it more. We just have more reps, right? Like I always tell people, it's like go back to everybody's YouTube channel and then ascend by first date of their first video, and you're going to see what they looked like then compared to where they look like now, and and that's okay. But I think this is for somebody that doesn't necessarily want to go on camera and front facing marketing stuff, like to the world, and how do I produce this? Like, this is easy because it's like, hey, you're just having a one-on-one Zoom conversation with somebody that's happening to be recorded, and you're building a relationship.
It's not even about you; it's about them, right? So the whole goal is let's make them look good. They're going to do most of the talking. You're asking the questions, right? So it's super easy.
Yeah, exactly. And by doing that, like, let's also be honest: if you're new to raising capital, like, you might be intimidated to talk to some high net worth individual when the role is technically flipped, and it's like, hey, did you check out my presentation and you see this right here? You have any questions on that? They're running, they're in essence interviewing you, and they're running the show on you. In this case, everything's flipped. So there's a lot of
great positioning, right?
I get it.
They're the ones that are a
It
little
makes
nervous. Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense to me. And like what you said, like, I think if we were we haven't actively raised capital in years, but if we were raising capital again when we started, like we had to when we started, like, I think this is definitely something that we would use. Makes a lot of sense to me.
Well, it was way harder back then.
What's that?
It was way harder for you back
Way
then.
harder.
You guys had to use real cameras, put the disc into the, you had to take the memory card out and put it in the computer, right? Like,
yeah.
But
I
it's so
interviews on CDs, for Christ's sake. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So, with that being said, I think it's real interesting, and it does give you credibility, and it allows you to even pace the conversation and bring up case studies as examples, because people love hearing examples. This has been really good. It's a really, really good reminder of why we do this. Because there's some days, listen, we all have our days where we're like, oh, I don't feel like doing this, but you know what? It's a great reminder of why we do this show. Thank you for recapping that. And I think everybody should have a podcast. Gary Vee was right. My man's always ahead of the curve. So just pay attention to what he's doing, but he said podcasts would be the biggest thing, and they are. And you got to remember, we take it for granted. A lot of people don't have this opportunity to get on here and chirp and talk about everything else. So, but that being said, this has been awesome. One thing we like to ask all our guests: what's one book or podcast that you enjoy or you think everybody should know about?
Oh, wow. Yeah. You know what? I'm just rereading my favorite business book of all time. It's called The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. Version 2.0 is out. He passed away about 12 years ago, unfortunately, but his daughter has revamped the book for the newer age. Absolutely amazing book about not just sales, but marketing and business in general. And it definitely applies to a lot of what we do in real estate.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll get that in the show notes. I have not listened to that one. I'll have to go check that one out. And then for everybody else in the interwebs, where's the best place people can find you, learn about you? They want to check out what you're doing, and they want to hear your podcast. Yeah.
Well, the podcast is called the Property Profits Real Estate Podcast. And if you're an active real estate investor, love to have you on the show. Like I say, we do a lot of episodes. We're always looking for awesome guests. And then if you're interested in this whole how to create your own lead generating podcast system, I've got a book out about that called the book's called How to Get 20 Accredited Investor Meetings Every Month. And you can get that, the PDF copy, for free at 20accreditedinvestorsbook.com. That's the number 20 accreditedinvestorsbook.com.
We'll get all of that in the show notes. We appreciate you guys. If you got any value out of this, because I know we did, please feel free to share the show. It's the best compliment we can give Dave, because he is just one of us out there grinding, not trying to sell you anything, just doing his thing. So go check him out. We appreciate you, and we will catch you guys on the next one.
Thanks for tuning in to the Real Estate Reserve Podcast. Do us a favor and like, comment, and share our broadcast. It helps the algorithm and helps us spread the word too. Till next time, thank you for tuning in.